casually sitting here getting ready to destroy your favorite books. Hey guys, so today I'm going to be going over some of the most overrated books that I have read that are super overhyped, popular, and people don't stop talking about them. But when I read them, I felt some type of way. When I read them, I was like, wait, this is the book that everyone has been freaking out about recently? Yeah. So I compiled a list of some of the most overhyped books that I do not think are worth the hype at all. So we are going to dive into those. I have just a wide range of genres and authors and books. If you love any of these books or these authors, that's great, that's wonderful. I love that for you. I'm not hating on you. You know, everyone is entitled to their own opinion and likes what they like. But this is just my opinion and how I feel about these books. First up on that list is Mayfly by CJ Leede. So this is supposed to be like feminine rage, like a good for her horror book. People are labeling this as extreme horror, which blows my mind. But this one just did not. I was constantly waiting for something to happen, and I just felt like this entire book, we're just reading about this woman and like her life and like working at Disneyland and whatever, and I'm like, okay, when is the horror going to happen? When are things going to start happening? She starts becoming more unhinged later on in the book, and then it leads up to this like crazy ending, but I was like, okay, where was the hype? What happened in this book that justified all of the 5-star rave reviews that this book got? I just feel like this was a case of maybe people who have never read horror before. I honestly don't know what it was, especially with people labeling this as like extreme horror and like hyping this up to be some like crazy American Psycho, Patrick Bateman-esque thing. I feel like this was kind of a ripoff of American Psycho, of, what's the book with the fly? Lord of the Flies? Is that what I'm thinking of? No, I don't know. There's another book that I'm thinking of. I don't know. I feel like this was a combination of like a ripoff of 2 to 3 very popular books, and they were all just combined into this thing where it was like trying to appeal to horror and extreme horror fans. I don't even know where all the hype came from, but this just did not do it for me. Next is one that I'm actually currently reading. So I haven't finished it yet, but I already know it's overhyped, and that is The Eyes Are the Best Part. This one is another like unhinged woman-esque book, and I just don't quite, everyone's been freaking out about this, giving it 5-star rave reviews and saying it's like super unhinged and, you know, the horror and it's super crazy. But I mean, I'm like over halfway through this book and so far nothing has happened. And I know things happen later on in the book, but the writing is actually the thing that I'm having a problem with. I feel like the writing is just super basic and like, I don't know, it feels very YA. We are following an 18-year-old girl about to turn 19, like she just graduated high school, and you know, so I'm not mad that it reads kind of YA, but the problem is she's supposed to be like turning 19 and it's reading like the POV of like a 15-year-old. So I just don't really quite understand why people are absolutely flipping out about this one. Even if this has redeeming qualities with the content later on in the book, I just don't think the writing is worth the hype. It just feels very basic in a bad way. Like the writing is just kind of giving me absolutely nothing, and the story is also very, very slow. Like I said, absolutely nothing has happened so far. I just don't really care what's going on. and it just feels very repetitive. Next is just Sally Rooney as an author. All of her books. All of her books, every single one. I've read Conversations with Friends and Normal People, absolutely hated them. I just don't understand the hype surrounding her as an author. I just really do not enjoy her writing style. I think her character development is awful. I think she writes very flat, like two-dimensional characters. I do think a lot of it is intentional. I do think she writes that way intentionally for a lot of her books and characters, but it just doesn't work for me. I feel like her writing is very jarring. It's very boring. It's just, I can't ever get fully invested into her plots or her characters. I also just don't appreciate her little endometriosis discussion. That was completely inaccurate. I tried 3 times to understand the hype, and I will never ever in a million years ever understand it. Another book and author that I don't get the hype for, Paul Tremblay, specifically horror movie. I have never seen a horror book so overhyped online in my life. This book was everywhere when it first came out. It was haunting me in my dreams. I couldn't sleep at night. I was seeing visions of this book in my brain. It was everywhere, and I finally gave into the hype. I was like, I'm going to pick up this book and I'm going to read it for a video. And of course, it completely let me down, which I should have known, because I've read multiple books by Paul Tremblay in the past and they just did not work for me. I feel like he writes sort of like intellectual horror where things are very ambiguous, which is fine, I don't mind that, but in a way where it's like, I don't know, kind of just irritating. Like it feels, I don't know, it's just off-putting. I can't even explain it. It just feels very intellectual, like I'm smarter than you sort of a thing. And I just do not vibe well with his writing. I feel like horror movies specifically, it was so boring. Nothing happened in this whole damn book until like towards the end. And it was just, you know, we're following this guy trying to redo this horror movie that was filmed in the past that became like a cult classic, and people died, and it was just boring. It was boring. The scenes from the movie were so boring. It had this like script aspect to it where it felt so disjointed and didn't make any sense, and flipping between the script and then the boring chapters from this guy's POV, I was basically put to sleep 25 times. I wish it would have put me to sleep permanently, because that's how bad I was suffering through this book. I was like, please, I'm suffering, just euthanize me already, because this book was dragging on and on and on and on and on for such little payoff. It was not creepy, it was not scary, it was just a boring, meandering mess. And that's how I feel like most of his books are. A pretentious, that was the word that I was looking for, pretentious, boring, meandering mess. Next on the list, Stephen Graham Jones. He's an author that has been super, super hyped recently. Especially on Instagram, I see a lot of people posting about him, obsessing over him. I read Night of the Mannequins, and The Only Good Indians, and both of these books I truly did not understand the hype. Felt like both of these books were super confusing. The writing was super confusing in a way that it felt very jumbled and just did not make sense. It felt like both of these books I was reading and reading and reading, and I was like, okay, what is the point of this? And then we got to the point and I was like, oh, that was it. I just didn't feel like they were anything great. Again, I didn't feel scared, I didn't feel frightened, I just felt very bored reading both of these, bored and confused. And then I know a lot of people are obsessed with like his slasher books, My Heart is a Chainsaw or whatever, that like trilogy. I've spoken to many people that absolutely hate that book. and said that the character development was awful, and like, I hate slashers, so I will never read them. But I don't know, I just feel like, in my opinion, I don't see where the hype is. I tried twice, and it was probably twice too many. I don't know. I don't get it. I see people on Instagram getting like tattoos of this man. Like, I am truly baffled. Next, Richard Laymon. I think I read Come Out Tonight and one other book by him. His books are nothing but breasts. Nothing but breasts, okay? The breasts are the best part. His books are like, this woman's running from a killer. Oh, her top falls off. Oh, she has massive breasts. Oh, her nipples are erect. What the fuck? It is so distracting because it's apparently every single book, because my friend loves him and like will send me pictures of his books, and every book, every woman has massive breasts that are just falling out of her top running from these men. And then like the men in the book are obsessed with breasts, and then like the killers are obsessed with the breasts, and I'm like, what kind of pervert? Is Richard Laymon dead? I think so. What kind of pervert was this man? Because it is so distracting and gross, and like, as a woman, I just don't want to be reading books like this. What? And why are their nipples always hard? Like, some other horror books that I didn't quite understand the hype with. I know David Sodergren is super, super hyped, especially all over Instagram. I keep seeing him everywhere. But I read Night Shoot and I read Dead Girl Blues, which was a DNF. And Night Shoot is like a slasher, kind of like a 90s slasher vibe. And I don't know, like, his writing is fine, but like, I don't know, both of these books I just felt very, I don't get it. Just felt very overhyped. Night Shoot was just like your generic, this crew is going to film this slasher movie, and most of it had to do with like this woman who didn't want to do the shower scene that these guys were forcing her to do, like to get naked in the movie. And it just felt like very generic, very basic. And then it had this weird plot where when you find out what's going on, it was just very confusing. I didn't quite understand what the hell was going on. I read it as a book club pick for my Patreon, and it seems like no one understood what exactly was going on here, and it just didn't quite hit the mark for me. It wasn't my style. I don't know. All of his books are completely different and have like different horror elements to them. I loved the horror. I would recommend that book time and time again. Monstruo, this is labeled as grief horror. I don't really see where the grief horror comes into play. So this couple, their son passes away, and the mom basically takes out his lung and saves it, and it grows into this monster, and they're basically raising this monster. So it sounds like grief horror, but it ended up being more about just like weird shit, like weird family stuff going on. I loved the mom's POV, but then things kind of went downhill from there. Like, we get the friend's POV, we get like the dad's POV, and it was just like their life drama and like relationships, and it had a lot of like queer commentary, and it just went in this direction that I was not expecting at all. It was like a weird literary fiction book that kind of had very little to do with grief horror. I guess it was showing how these different people deal with their grief, but it was done in a way where like it wasn't sad, it wasn't, I don't know, it just did not hit for me. I didn't quite understand the hype. I'm sorry, do not label this grief horror, because I like grief horror usually, so that's why I was reading this one and I was like, wow, I am baffled that people are saying that this is some like depressing grief horror book. I think this is one where you need to know what you're getting into. If you want like weird lit fic, maybe, But grief horror, honey, no. Diavola, oh my gosh. Chris, my friend Chris has told me how to pronounce this book probably 72 times and I say it wrong every single time. But another horror book, I think I hate horror. I think my problem is that I'm taking basic horror recommendations and reading them and I don't even like this genre that much anymore. That is my problem. I think I finally figured out what the problem is and it's me. I'm the problem, it's me. So this book is this super hyped gothic horror book and it's just about a woman correcting everyone's Italian pronunciations for 200 pages and then it's 100 pages of the ghost with piss yellow hair, dyeing things piss yellow, making the food moldy, and that's it. It's just piss yellow. That's about it. That's all I have to say about this one. I've ranted about this book so many times on this channel that it's just not even worth my breath anymore. Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros. Why is this the most popular, one of the most popular fantasy books? It's an adult book that reads YA, which is one of my biggest pet peeves ever. I hate when I go into a book expecting it to be an adult book and it reads super, super young, like they're supposed to be adults, there's sex scenes, but they all read like they're 15 years old. I'm just very confused because these authors could just write a YA book, label it as YA, and like, that's great, that's wonderful, it's fine. Like, don't write a YA book and then try to label it as adult. It just doesn't make sense. What is going on with these publishers and these authors? I don't know, I don't understand it, but I'm so tired of it and I'm sick and tired of reading books with teenagers in them. But also like this one, they weren't teenagers and they felt like teenagers, but that's not even the full problem that I had with this book. I have a whole video on it. The plot did not make sense. The school did not make sense. The war did not make sense. Nothing about this book made sense. The way the dragons worked didn't make sense. There were so many plot holes. There were so many things that actually did not make sense. It was just sloppy, poor writing, should have been edited better. This was just a hot mess, and I honestly feel like it's led to me having conspiracy theories about this book because something sketchy is going on. Something sketchy is going on that this book got so popular. Speaking of overhyped fantasy romance books, I feel like I can't talk about one without the other in my videos. A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas. Again, this is like a smutty, like Beauty and the Beast retelling or whatever. What the hell was with this first book? What the hell was this? So poor, like poor character development, poor relationships, like poor romance, didn't make sense. It was very abrupt, very like Twilight-esque, where it's just like, oh, there's these two people that are randomly in love with each other for no reason. But why? But how? But how did we get to this point? Like what is going on? Oh, but he's so strong and has muscles. Okay, so what? So does like 50% of the population. I'm just confused. And then she's just like kidnapped by this guy and she's like, oh, but he's so hot. Oh, but he's like a wolf. What the hell? And then she's like perusing around their mansion that she's kidnapped in. And I'm just, this whole book, absolutely nothing happened but her being like, oh, but he's so hot, but he has muscles. I hope he kisses me tonight. Girl, oh my God. Again, is this girl 15 years old? And then we get to the point where like things are happening and it was just stupidity. And then the answer is love, the end. Such a waste of time, a waste of my time. And then people are like, oh, but the rest of the series is better, but it's like smutty. No, thank you. I'm over it. Sarah, overrated. Last but not least, I actually have an extreme horror book. It's Playground by Aron Beauregard. This book I have seen literally fucking everywhere online, okay? Literally everywhere. It's one of the most popular extreme horror books or whatever. So I read it and the writing. How is this a full-length book, first of all? We're like following, there's like this playground that's like funded, and like low income families go there and like bring their kids, and the kids are being killed. Oh my God, so horrible. There was so much alliteration where I'm talking like every sentence was just non-stop alliteration. Oh my God. I'm not even kidding. I think page 1 said something like, I'm just gonna use my name for an example because it starts with the letter M. Megan's magnificent mammary glands. Like, I'm not even kidding. That was one of the sentences in the first page. I don't remember what her name was, but it started with an M. And I was like, oh my God, instead of like boobs, breasts, whatever, this is what he says. And then it just goes on from there. It was so much alliteration. I felt like I was reading a fucking Dr. Seuss book. The fabulous flamingo at the flaming factory. Oh my God! Make it stop! Make it fucking stop. And I found it so hard to believe. I only saw one other person review this book and mention the obnoxious amounts of alliteration, and no one else. I found it so hard to believe that no one else was pointing this out. I was like, how am I the only fucking one that realizes this? Again, I'm like, is this a conspiracy? I don't know, but oh my God, the alliteration. He would be great as a children's book author, I think, but wow. That is it. Those are the overrated books that I just needed to bring up today. I feel like most of them were super predictable. If you've been watching me for a while, you know how I feel about most of these books and authors, but yeah, these are the ones that I just cannot stop seeing online, and they're haunting me. They're literally haunting me in my sleep, and I just needed to bring them up. So thank you so much for watching. I love you guys, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye.